Good evening, everybody.
Evening.
Good evening again.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 593, The Hidden, Forbidden, True History of the First Thanksgiving. And tonight we have Michael and Mike, and as always, Dr. Ricks. And hang on, because we got kind of a major announcement coming up. So stay with us.
Okay, two quick stupid groaners. How do you get a message to a fish? You drop a line. This one's even stupider. Why are teddy bears never hungry? They're always stuffed. Okay, now these two are better. For Veterans Day, we threw in a veterans joke. As a Vietnam vet, by the way, I used to be, when you first got back, the media made, oh, you're Vietnam vets, you're murdering all those innocent Viet Cong. And anyway, I'm going all that garbage. Now everything has flipped. Now you can be proud of being a Vietnam vet. It's just like, anyway, a veterans joke here. Just before a long naval deployment, three sailors were talking about telling their wives they're going to be gone probably at sea for maybe 5, 6, 7 months. And one of the senior men overheard him. He said, you got to be sensitive to your wives' feelings. So remember this. When you're packing for your overseas deployment, do not whistle. That makes sense, right? Okay, this is a pièce de résistance. It's called Another Woman. Mary asked Don thoughtfully. She said, Don, what would you do if your husband started having an affair with another woman? What would you do? And she thought for a minute, my husband having an affair with another woman? She said, well, first thing I would do is I would break her cane, and then I would smash her blind guide dog, and then I'd get an Uber card and send her back to the institution from which she came. Doesn't say much for a husband, right? Yes, you got to be blind and crazy anyway. So.
Okay. That one went over my head, Dr. Ricks. I got to say it.
It's the guard. It's the blind. I should have said the blind guide dog. Yeah. He must be crazy and blind.
All right.
To have an affair with my husband. Okay, well, see, that's why it's a good one. He has a little thinking to get it. I probably didn't say it as well as I should have either. I'm not a Jimmy Kimmel yet. That's probably a good thing, actually.
Oh, not.
we got more viewers.
We might actually, almost really, consider he's on network TV and his ratings are that bad. Oh, well. The hidden, somewhat forbidden true history of the first Thanksgiving. One of the things that I wanted to discuss first is America overall, let's say for the last 2.5 centuries, the most blessed nation, period? I mean, overall, I realize the ups and downs and all that stuff. But overall, would you agree that America, the last maybe even 3 centuries, because even in the colonial days, 1700, the American economy overall was better than the economy in England, which I thought when the English found that out, what? We're sending all those bums over there, and then all of a sudden they get there and they become productive. That's actually what the British discovered, which is a bit of a shock, right? You never think of the Pilgrims, the Puritans, and those early people being more prosperous than the average Englishman or Irishman, but they were.
They were motivated.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there were actually English leading men. They actually, the religious people are glad to get rid of a lot of Puritans because they didn't agree with the Church of England, but others they encouraged to come over here because they were troublemakers, bums, and people they didn't like. And they sent them also to Australia too. But they figured when they got to America, well, a bunch of bums and religious nuts, it'd be a basket case. But instead, they got over here and all of a sudden became productive. Who would have thought?
You know, it's a blend of opportunity and the room to expand and to reap the reward of your own labor, and you see that happening around you. You know, it's fairly inspiring, and you know, to be able to spread out and to have land. You know, when in Europe, wasn't exactly like that. You know, you're kind of cloistered in. You know, it's not just open season for, you know, anywhere you can go and set up shop to do whatever it is that you feel like you can get ahead doing. It's a pretty powerful thing. No, I think that proves it. You know, that era of history certainly proves it.
Yeah. They had room. They were not as restricted as they were in England. You know, remember like all the castles and so forth, you couldn't hunt on that land, you know, and you come over here and you've got the whole world, it would seem like. Yeah. The freedom to do something and make progress for yourself.
I've heard some people from India who came to America, and in India they were restricted by, they didn't know the 5 classes and all that other traditional stuff in India. They got to America, all those restrictions were off, even among the Indian community inside America. And can you imagine, the Europeans had their class structure too. Maybe it's not as rigid as in India, but they had it. So if you were a peasant or somebody that, you know, the Earl of Suffolk didn't like, whatever, you were restricted. You couldn't, you know, but you came to America, well, you know, you might be able to do anything you could get away with doing.
Yeah.
Even in trades and things like that, when you think of the guilds and things that populated Europe back in the day, it's very restricted. Like, you have to progress through this system. It's a closed system. You know, you're not going to be able to just go set up shop as a cobbler or a tanner or whatever it may be. You know, that this is protected. Like, we do this, we do it together. The prices are fixed essentially. It's it's a big government kind of thing. It's certainly not, utterly free and open.
And I think God actually blessed America. If you ever look at a map of how each chunk of territory became part of the United States, and you look at all the dates and all the circumstances, you said, wow, it's amazing. That just can't all be just good luck. It's got to be blessings, just all kinds of things worked out. I'm going to go through it all, but we're really blessed, and I don't even think we know we're blessed. A lot of people, I want to go live in another country. Nobody's keeping you from leaving.
Nope.
But in most cases, by the way, a lot of immigrants don't come here just for economic opportunities. They come here for freedom. And we take that for granted. Like one of my Chinese students said, she's a grad student. She said, everything's so intense in China and locked up. You're under intense pressure. She said, you Americans are so happy-go-lucky. You get all this freedom and space and good stuff. Now, most Americans don't think we're happy-go-lucky because we're worried about our credit card debt. So I realize most Americans would chuckle at that. But it's all relative. If you were in China, you would understand when she says you Americans have a happy-go-lucky freedom and don't even know it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of Chinese people that when they get here, they try to warn people in this country of because there's a big push for socialism and communism. They try to warn people of what America would look like if it goes full commie, how things would not be as fun and as happy as what they are now.
So yeah. I think that because we have a lot of leftists in education and the media and Hollywood, they have minimized the full understanding of the first Thanksgiving. I've even seen a TV show where they accused the Pilgrims of being genocidal maniacs. By the way, that's not true. There are Indian reservations in Massachusetts. Say that correctly, Massachusetts. And those same tribes are still here. They got more people than they used to have, of course, but they're still here. And of course, there's a lot of intermarriage as well, but they're still here. People, believe me, that's not how genocide works.
I had these books, and it's got a lot of source material. It's got a lot of letters and like different charters and laws and things that were passed along the way of early American history. Well, all of American history, but it's hard to read. It's hard to read it like a book. It gets pretty laborious as you're going through it. But in some of the stuff about relations with the natives as the country grew, and there was tension as the frontiers expanded, but many of the tribes felt incredibly blessed by the association and by the technology and the goods that they had access to, and essentially integrated. And those success stories are not the ones that you hear about. You hear about the ones that refused and went off, and then it was war, and then it all this stuff. But in the best sense, the successful side of it would be adapting and becoming a part of society, and not even being able to tell the difference before. There's not going to be any sob stories or some drama written about that when everybody accepts the laws generally and the blessings that go along with it and become a functioning part of society. You don't read about that much.
Also, did you know the Puritans made a peace treaty with the Wampanoag Indians? It lasted for 50 years. That's a long time in human history. Think about wars between France and Germany and a whole bunch of other countries. 50 years of peace, it would be a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, but do you know that Washington, Adams, and Madison tried to get Thanksgiving as an official holiday, but they never got it through Congress, not until Abraham Lincoln did it in 1863. And 1863 was a crisis for America. I know from our perspective now, we say, well, it was logical that the Civil War would be won and America would stay united. But if you lived in 1863, you weren't so sure of that. Two big battles were won. By the way, I do know this from some other historical stuff I've uncovered. A lot of the European countries did not like the fact that America was getting so big and powerful and the number one neutral shipper in the world, a bunch of other things. They wanted America to break into pieces. And France was ready. If the Confederacy could just win a battle in the North, they were ready to join. Just like they helped America beat Britain, that would be a big deal. Do you realize the Battle of Gettysburg could have been lost? I was talking to a historian at the Gettysburg Museum. I took my grandkids to see that about 4 years ago. It's really, anyway, a lot to it. And if Custer hadn't accidentally, he led the Michigan Cavalry to block Jeb Stuart's trying to circle around behind the Union forces, they might have won the Battle of Gettysburg. Yep. Custer was the hero, and that was more by accident. It wasn't that they knew they were coming. Custer just saw something that didn't look right. He went out and his cavalry challenged it, and then he got other states, and they tied up Jeb Stuart. And anyway, the point is that battle was almost lost. We assume that, you see what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't assume, in other words, if that had been lost, it is probable that America would have broke up in 2 or 3 or more chunks. And other states, if they got mad about something, could break away too. Once you get the thing established that you can break away, you see the problems, don't you?
Yeah.
And God, I think it was God's will both to end slavery and to keep America united as a blessing. Mm-hmm. But it took that crisis to get Congress to pass the Thanksgiving holiday. Doesn't that say something about Congress?
Oh. Yes.
I mean, you would think they would have done it without a gripping crisis like that, wouldn't you?
No.
Yeah.
No.
It's an interesting time to pause and give thanks when you're in the midst of tribulation, essentially, and you look at the Civil War, and it's like there's more American casualties in that war than any other sense, right? It's enormous loss of life. I mean, it's people, fighting to do that. It hasn't happened like that here before on our own land in the same manner, and such a close relation between the sides that are fighting. It's fairly brutal. But to pause in that moment and give thanks, Bible says to give thanks in everything always, and that's difficult. That can be difficult to do, to appreciate what you do have, even in the midst of something like that, when it's all up for grabs.
That's the one thing about Thanksgiving. It's the one holiday that man created that is not tied to paganism in any way, shape, or form. I mean, it's all thanks to God, and it's over my lifetime, it's become minimized in its importance. I mean, Thanksgiving was a major thing. Now it's just a blip between Halloween and Christmas now. I mean, it was a big deal. It was a family everybody got together. It was a big deal. Now it's
By the way, you know what made me mad? I heard this lady talk about it. I think it was 3 years ago, whenever it was. There are a bunch of psychiatrists, psychologists on TV saying, look, if your relatives voted for Trump, it's about 3 years ago, and other despicable things, don't invite them to Thanksgiving. You realize how stupid and anti-American, anti-family culture that is?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It just occurred to me. I'm sorry. The way as divided as this country is now again, Trump should have jumped on Thanksgiving maybe and tried to make it as a way. I don't know how he would have pulled it off, but try to use Thanksgiving to unify the country again, because there's just so much hatred on both sides. It's just we need something to stop this mess, but I don't see it changing Thanksgiving or any other holiday at this point. But it was just because that's why it was. I mean, that was the kind of the sense of it when it was created, to try and reunite the country and heal the country.
And
That would be good.
it as
I was going to say that would be good, and it is one that's completely overlooked. It goes from Halloween to Christmas like that. I mean, there's Christmas lights up everywhere around here already. They're well into the swing of it. But what do you sell? It's not really a commercial holiday in the same way. What do you sell? Time with your family? You can't put a price on that, and sharing a meal and enjoying. It doesn't require you to. Well, I mean, you buy food and turkey and maybe some other kinds of things that you wouldn't normally, but that's not actually that big of a deal in the grand scheme. Sure isn't Christmas by any means.
That was before marketing, though. Those were the days before marketing. Marketing, all is marketing. That's where we're at now.
Part of the marketing problem was, too, if you'd gone back 20 years ago, the stores had agreed, because they believed in God and Thanksgiving, or were embarrassed, they wouldn't open up Black Friday until after midnight on Thanksgiving, usually about 2 a.m. I know that sounds crazy. People would get in line at 2 a.m. to charge these stores at the middle of the night to be first in line to get the deals. Well, then they kept encroaching more and more on Thanksgiving. And a lot of the workers would say, well, wait a minute. I got to go in and work, because Black Friday now starts at 7 p.m., 6 p.m. at the big store. So the workers got to go in a few hours early to get everything ready. So they got to have a real early Thanksgiving meeting and get back to work. It's like the stores are just trampling all over Thanksgiving.
Right.
They don't even bother to wait. I think it's even earlier than 6 p.m. they start the Black Friday shopping.
Well, heck, it's going on now. I mean, all the deals are out now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got to chase that dollar.
Yep.
Yeah, buddy.
And family and God, but breaking up families over politics is just bad policy. It doesn't lead to healthy people. But I think the far left was pushing it in a way of punishing people so they wouldn't dare support anything that the establishment didn't want them to support.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just evil use of political power. But by the way, here's another fact. When Lincoln asked for Congress to bring Thanksgiving as an official holiday, he said something that when I read it, so I assume this is accurate from his speech. The U.S. economy grew during the Civil War, and the U.S. population grew. You would expect the exact opposite. But if you look at the border states in the North especially, but whatever statistics he was looking at, the economy grew during the war. He said that's quite a blessing. And the farms were very productive. Who would have guessed?
The war is a very lucrative business.
I was going to say the military-industrial
Yeah.
complex grew.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell that to Black,
expanded
was it
greatly when he
Blackwater or
federalized the railroads. You know.
Yeah. Yep. Everything, when you got war going on, money is no object.
And Tim, would you read our first scripture?
All right. And at the dedication Jerusalem they with gladness, both with thanksgivings and with singing and with cymbals.
I just think it's a good biblical principle that when the country is blessed, now that's when they got the walls and the temple and everything going good in Jerusalem. They had a big Thanksgiving celebration. But I think the principle still applies. When God blesses a nation, it's good to thank God for it. And also, one of the things, I won't read his whole speech. I'll just read a little of this, one little part here. He says, this is Lincoln, with humble penitence for our national perseverance and disobedience, commend to his tender care all those who have become widows, orphans, mourners, sufferers, in this lamentable civil strife. And I'm skipping a few things, and fervently implore the interposition of the Almighty hand to heal the wounds of the nation and to restore it. So then we ask the question, because a lot of European countries said, well, America will never recuperate from this Civil War. Even if they win the war, they'll still be divided and they'll have guerrilla warfare. It's just America will never be a united country. But within a few years after, by 1871, the U.S. economy was one of the most dominant in the world. And I asked someone, I said, why do you think America could heal after such a horrible war? And the answer was, obviously God answered Lincoln's prayer, but I'm going to make another statement. Because the majority of Americans were still church-going, Bible-believing Christians as best they understood it.
Yeah.
Yeah. People appreciated and understood the blessings. They were closer to the land. You know, they had opportunity, and some opportunity, something that's not in other countries of the world. I think we underestimate that. I spent some time in Mexico, and there's just no opportunity for anybody to do anything down there. I mean, it's just hand to mouth all the time, and you don't have that situation up here. You just don't see it. You know, people can do stuff. They're not limited. You know, and that's clearly a blessing that God's given us. You know, and hasn't given other nations of the world. You know, and somebody made the remark a while ago that our poorest live a lot better than other people in the world, and that's absolutely true.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some of these people fuss and complain about how bad they have it. They ought to go to some of these other foreign countries a little bit and take a look around. You know, those of us that have been over there, it's blatantly obvious. You know, and you've got to give credit to God because that's where it comes from. Other countries have as much resources, they have as much people, they've got land, they got oil, they got gold, you know, but they don't have the freedom, they don't have the motivation, and they don't have the blessings from God that this country has. And this Thanksgiving is a time that we should try to draw together. I think that's great, and recognize that it's a blessing from God,
Yes.
you know, that is given to us.
Yes.
And thankfulness, I think, helps direct God's blessings to America. Because I think it was a great idea to have Thanksgiving. As I said, George Washington celebrated it, but they didn't make it a national holiday, but he wanted to. And so let's go to the big issue, the wonderful blessings of the true first Thanksgiving, and why they don't really emphasize it like I think they should. Most schools teach that the Pilgrims were close to starvation until the native saved them and taught them how to plant and farm. They were about to die. And I was looking at an article earlier. They said it was really, how do I word it? Both sides benefited. It was not a one-sided deal, if you look at it accurately. And the way it makes the Indians look stupid. I mean that respectfully. I mean the Native Americans, like I said, accurate. I know Indians is not an appropriate term anymore. They got rid of the Cleveland Indians. Terrible. Anyway, but
long live Chief
Waffen. It's period correct. You're okay. Yeah.
but actually, it was both sides benefited, and to teach that it was the Indians saved them, they're about to die is an oversimplification, if not an outright distortion of the true history of the two groups when they got together.
If you read what is it, of a Plymouth Plantation, that was William Bradford. The way he writes it, it was actually an abundance of the Pilgrims after they threw off their socialist experiment that the backers put them up to, the backers who brought them over to this country
from England.
Yeah. It's weird because at the last minute, their backers, their rich English backers, threw this on them. You're going to do this whole community thing where everybody shares the work and shares the bounty. And they almost died doing that. Bradford finally said, you know what? Now we're done with that. We're not doing that anymore. And then they had this big bounteous harvest, and they invited the Indians because it was a rough year for the Indians. And another thing about the Indians is they didn't have a hoe. They didn't have a shovel. They borrowed that stuff. The Pilgrims loaned them tools so they could work the ground. Everybody, when I grew up, they told us that the Indians showed English how to plant corn. No, all they did was show the English that the soil they were planting the corn in was very it wasn't ripe enough, so they dropped the fish in to help get some fertilizer in the ground to help the corn grow. I mean, they had corn in Europe. They brought the corn with them, the plant. I mean, it's not like they didn't know what they were doing. They just didn't know how bad the soil was. So everything I remember seeing the pictures in the books of the Indians showing this was when I was a kid, and I'm not a young man, of the Indians showing these Pilgrims how to plant corn, and they had these little drawings, and it's all black and white. It's all a lie. If you read Bradford's book, it's all a lie.
By the way, here's something that I didn't realize a few years ago. Do you know why England led the Industrial Revolution in Europe, and I guess the world? Because the English got better and better at farming, and they were able to get about 27, I remember the exact number, 27% of their population off the farm into the cities because the rest could produce enough food, where most countries in Europe, only like 5% could not be farmers or they'd starve. And that 27% worked in shops and early factories in England. And this is like 1620, 1622, when the Industrial Revolution got really big in England. That meant when the Pilgrims came over, at least for the world in those days, they had the best agricultural knowledge and probably tools to work the soil than anybody in the world. I realize it wasn't, compared to what we got now, it wasn't all that big a deal, but in 1620, it was the best that existed. So they got to teach the Indians and give them tools that they wouldn't have. Both sides helped each other, but also they made a peace compact with the Indians According to this other book I have about the New World, internecine fighting among Indian tribes was a big problem. And they claim that Chief Massasoit, I hope I get all these names right, he had one of his scouts, they noticed that boat unloading the pilgrims. And he made a decision, we could attack them now when they're first getting offshore. Who knows what might happen? But he noticed they had guns. And they were under pressure from I forgot the name. It's one of the tribes in the Iroquois League from their west, was pushing at them that might even, because they're weakened by diseases and other things, that might even eliminate them. They were hard pressed by their enemies. He said, these people can be allies, and they got guns. And they were able to sell the Indians guns. I'll give you what I got out of a general reading was, the Pilgrims were like an outpost to European manufacturing for the Indians. So the Pilgrims and the Indians sold furs, certain other products that were, let's say, best gotten in the New World to England. And then they got things like sugar, spice, and certain manufactured goods from England that they could not have gotten anywhere else. So that tribe benefited and prospered, and they had 50 years of peace before war came between them. And as I say, and there are reservations there, and they're still there. So that, but both sides benefited. Also, they sold gunpowder to the Indians too, because they couldn't have gotten that on their own, at least in those days. All of which kind of surprises you, right?
Yeah.
I've even heard professors say the stupid stuff that bow and arrows were just as good as rifles. The Indians were so good at it, they were better than rifles. You're laughing, but it was a professor in a college who said that.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, that explains a lot.
Now, granted, the rifles they had at first weren't so good, but they got better and better. And, the history of rifle. Yeah, a good rifle, well, of course, and all the Indian tribes got guns as soon as they could get them. Nobody,
yeah.
I'm not taking away from a great bow and arrow and all that good stuff. And there are people that go bow hunting, but I'll bet you if you tell them, which is the most lethal, a good rifle or a good bow and arrow, what are they going to tell you?
Yeah, they didn't trade their rifles in for bow and arrows. It was the other way around.
Yeah, but there people believe all this crazy stuff.
Yeah.
I guess it fits a certain narrative, but both sides benefited. And in 1622 they had a great Thanksgiving. It lasted 3 days. And I think when they kicked off socialism, because socialism, you don't have an incentive to work hard.
No.
And Bradford called it the free rider problem.
Yeah, young men who didn't have families seen themselves working extra hard and getting very little of the bounty, and married women were doing the laundry for other people, and I mean it just didn't work. It's like everything else. Liberalism generates the exact opposite of its stated intent every time it's tried. They almost starved to death when there was another ship coming behind that first ship, and that ship was loaded with people that were there to to kind of add to the colony. And when they got off the ship and seen the horrid condition the Pilgrims were in, they broke down in tears. They thought, "Oh no, we're next," because they were doing all this socialism.
But when they went to capitalism, every family got to keep all the profits. They were incentivized to work hard.
Then they became exporters back to, which is what they were there for to begin with. Their backers sent them there to send back goods, skins and hides and grain and things shipped back to England. That's why they backed them with their money. And they finally started producing after everything was put back to a capitalist plan.
And America has been the capitalism leader of the world ever since. I don't think the world fully recognized it until about 1900. They realized, wow, America, and Wall Street became the center of world high finance. So the world maybe didn't recognize it, but I think America was a place where innovations and capitalism had the greatest freedom and resources to blossom. And it started with the Pilgrims. And a lot of people like to pick on the Pilgrims. Oh, stupid religious nuts. But you realize they laid the foundation for at least in military size and economic size, the greatest nation in the history of the world.
Yep. That group were Saturday or Sunday keepers. There was another group that came over here. They don't get much play, but they were Sabbath keepers. I don't know if they were the Puritans or what they were, but they were another group. And I guess they were productive and successful right from the start.
Oh, by the way, we think, people who look in that book called The True History of the True Church, that most of the Sabbath keepers in Europe quickly realized America was the place you ought to be because you had religious freedom. And almost every country in Europe has an official religion. But America never had one.
Mm-hmm.
A few states almost had one. And Virginia had some experiments with it.
Some of the colonies had strictures that there would only be one denomination or whatever it would be early on, even the pre the United States of America. It was limited to that. But in the general sense, what you were talking about earlier, Dr. Rakes, with people being able to come over here and work and reap the reward of their labors, in terms of thankfulness. When you're able to do it and to worship according to your conscience, and you're not giving, you're not forced to pay tithes to the Church of England or to the Catholic Church or to be under the thumb. Maybe we don't agree with all the doctrines of all the different denominations and people that came and settled, but on an individual basis to be able to pursue life according to your conscience as you understand it. That's a huge thing in your attitude, I think, and how the way you feel about it, which is big. I think that's big.
And even the states that had official religion, eventually they spread out because this group didn't like that group. Let's form a new place. We'll call it New Hampshire, Rhode Island. And the big states like Virginia, they experimented with an official state religion, but from reading Jefferson's book, I get the impression that Thomas Jefferson and Virginia decided having an official state religion didn't work. And that was one of the reasons that he wrote, what he did about religious freedom as the First Amendment and the first Bill of Rights, freedom of religion. I don't think they expected most colonies to be Christian, don't get me wrong, but they still wanted freedom of religion. We look at that, it's not a big thing, but freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom of speech. Do you know in much of the world that is still not available?
Yeah, most of the world.
Yeah,
I think freedom of speech is unique to this country and 2 or 3 others, and that's it. I mean, Britain had it in theory, but obviously they don't have it now.
There was this guy on YouTube last night, 2C News, and he was saying their reporter was arrested because he was reporting on an Islamic riot or something. And apparently the English government doesn't allow you to report on certain things, say certain things. To me, it sounded like it was quite acceptable what he was doing. He wasn't interfering. He wasn't making it worse. But the British government, freedom of speech is no longer free in Britain.
No.
Which is shocking, like less than it used to be. But at any rate, all those are reasons why America was blessed.
Did you see the reporter ask what's the Prime Minister of Britain? What's his name?
Starmer?
Yes, Starmer.
Starmer, yeah. They asked Starmer in front of Trump. They were standing next to each other about this freedom of speech, and Starmer was stammering right like crazy. He couldn't. He's trying to spit out what he couldn't say it. He had to. I mean, he tried his best to try and blow it off, but it didn't work very well. It was hard, and then Trump's looking at him like he gave him his the usual Trump stare.
Well, Kim, would you read Proverbs 6:9, please?
How long will you slumber, O sluggard? When will you rise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber. So shall your poverty come on you like a prowler, and your need like an armed man. And then Thessalonians 3:10. For even when we were with you, we commanded you this: if anyone will not work, neither shall he eat.
When you read that, doesn't that seem cruel and heartless?
No.
No.
But I bet you if you ask most liberals and even a lot of non-liberals, that's heartless.
Yeah, I don't care. I don't care what they think. I'm done with them. Sorry.
But that was one of the reasons. That's one of the fights going on in Congress. I'm not sure how it will work out, but they don't want people who are young, healthy people who aren't taking care of the elderly or children and are healthy enough to work. They don't want them to be on certain government benefits. They say if you can't get a job, then volunteer 20 hours for some.
Yeah.
But do something. Don't just take benefits and do nothing.
That's a good writer because it doesn't go against being charitable necessarily. Just like in this, it says if anyone will not work. It doesn't say that you can't work or there's some reason that you're out of work temporarily or anything like that, where charity may be appropriate. But like this law that they're trying to put in that you can't just camp on government benefits forever. At the very least, you're gonna go and volunteer. And if you're able-bodied, what's the answer why you shouldn't do that? Why, if you are on the receiving end, why you shouldn't give back what you can? I mean, you're not working. You have the time to do it. And who knows what it will lead to. That's a good, honest, common sense thing to put back into government, where it's usually sadly lacking.
That only works in a society that has moral and that has we qualified when I was younger. We never would have went on it. But we qualified for a lot of stuff when I was young. We wouldn't do it.
Well, the idea that if you are able to take care of yourself and provide for yourself, that you should. Like it's your obligation, it's your responsibility. It's certainly something that God put in place, and that's not against getting help when you need it. That's very biblical also. But the abuse, you've got the thou shalt not steal quoted down here. It's not highlighted, so I didn't know if we were going to read it or not. The abuse of charity is exactly that. Charity itself is a good and a righteous thing and a Christian obligation, but the abuse of it is a crime, and that's very clear in the Old Testament and in the New Testament.
And I like what you said, Mike. Let's say if you need charity for 4, 5, 6 months. That's fine. But over time, after the 5 or 6 months is up, you should be able to get a job and pull yourself out of it, right?
I think so.
Idea. Yeah, that's the idea.
By the way, they do include mental illness. Because I do know, well, the guy's dead now, but he couldn't hold a job because of his mental illness. And I think that's also included. If you're mentally ill, you can get certain government benefits long term. But if you've got a halfway reasonable mind, you should be out there trying your best, right? And I know it's not always easy to get jobs and keep jobs. So I understand it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I've been pretty dirt poor in my life. It's no fun, but you buy cheap cars, cheap, places to live, cheap food, cheap whatever. You just do what you got to do.
Yeah. Actually, a lot of smart people go to box stores for food, But the people who are on government programs, they don't do that.
What was you going to say, Mike?
I was just going to say, you do what you have to do to get by.
Yeah.
You know, you work your way out.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's supposed to be all these programs are supposed to help you back to get on your feet, not to be a permanent, crutch. People are born into it and they die in it now. It's sad. It really doesn't do much for their self-respect or self-esteem. So
I think it was J.D. Vance that said it's supplemental. You know, it's not supposed to be a career choice.
Yeah, that's kind of funny, but yes, yeah. And it's biblical all the way around. I had 1 Thessalonians 4, 11 and 12 says, and that you study to be quiet and to do your own business and to work with your own hands as we commanded you, that you may walk honestly toward them which are without, and that you may have lack of nothing. And, faith and diligence put together, God provides. He finds a way. I think very much so. And in our discussion of early America, and you're trying to send the dregs of society over here, whatever it may be, or religious fanatics, or whatever it may be, and you see them prosper and grow and all that. That's very much in line with this. You mind your own business and you do your best, and it will work out. You do that with faith to God, being thankful always. It's going to work out.
By the way, if you're able to stay married couples are 95% after a few years to not be in poverty. Isn't that surprising?
Yep. Teamwork makes the dream work.
Yeah. But it's true. And I'm not putting down single parents, but it's much easier for single parents to fall into poverty than married couples.
Well, biblically, that's just not supposed to happen either. So just for
that's true too.
Guide rails, we know it does, and you deal with what that's something that's out there in society. But if you're looking at the ideal, that's not the ideal either. That's not a situation should be in, though it does happen.
Yeah, and
sorry,
we need Thanksgiving like 1622 and 1863 needed it. We need it. Also, I think when they learn to respect private property, that's one way of showing your respect for the eighth commandment.
Mm.
By the way, one more thing they were blessed with. They were blessed with a translator, Squanto, who probably was the only person on the planet Earth who could speak the King James English very, very well, and also knew all the local tribal languages. And he walked into their village in the beginning of all this, and he had been converted to Christianity in Europe. Isn't that an amazing blessing?
Yeah, and the odds of that happening were infinitesimal. Actually.
Yeah.
I mean, that was no accident.
You can tell God planned it in advance. A fishing boat picked him up and sold him in Europe as a slave, and he learned English in London, and some religious people helped him buy his way to freedom. And then he got on a fishing boat to come back to his homeland. Came back to his homeland, and there were the Pilgrims. It was like a perfect, at least that facilitated the two groups working together because they could talk together.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's clear that God was blessing them.
Yeah, he had a pretty amazing life. Think about what he went through, from what his background was going into London and England, and and unbelievable stuff to him.
And right now, if you look at cities like New York and Seattle, they're going back into socialism and communism, which the founding fathers already proved didn't work. They're going backwards. And they want free stuff. Doesn't that sound sinful? I want free stuff. Doesn't that sound like greed?
It usually comes from people that are talentless and have no drive and have no, or they want power because they're a politician But most of the people that want that, they just have, I don't know, they're of a type of people that want socialism.
I think educationally it's difficult in the same way that we've talked about the original Thanksgiving, if you will, and some of the misconceptions around that. People are growing up, especially in big liberal cities and all that, with a very jaundiced idea of where wealth comes from. That it is all one person exploiting another. That it can't be mutually beneficial. That capitalism is an evil machine to keep poor people down. And all these other things, that it's all ripped out of slavery and colonialism and, every bad thing in the world. And therefore, it's only right that the rich pay their fair share and, give you, whatever it is that you need or you think that life would make life easier for you. And, yeah, I get it. If you're in New York and you ride the bus and you think, hey, I don't have to pay for that anymore, that probably sounds like a pretty good deal. But that's a very slippery slope to get on. And, the idea that, I don't know, it doesn't address any root causes of why things may be unaffordable or anything else that may be leading to it. It just says, give the government more power and we'll take control of everything and make it right to you. We'll be your hero and your champion. And, that's getting the bad guys in the story a little mixed up, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And would you, obviously, a lot of people are gullible and uneducated about how bad communism was. The greatest economic disaster in the 20th century was the Soviet Union and the Eastern European communist countries. I guess Cuba is still communist, but it's been an economic disaster.
Yeah. It's funny because
I'm told
the liberals that learn from their professors say, oh, that's because they can't trade. Because it's all about the trade, because we had got an embargo on them or whatever, and I tell you, look, they can trade with any country on the planet but us. So what's the problem? Nobody else is. It's just us they can't trade with. They can trade with anybody else, and then they're done usually after that. Lamentations. Why should a living man complain, a man for the punishment of his sins? Let us search out and examine our ways and turn back to the Lord. And then 2 Chronicles. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sin and heal their land.
So the question is, what can we do to facilitate America turning back to God? And I just put it this way. I think there are spiritual laws of thankfulness. Just like gravity is a law, I think being thankful is a law. In other words, if you're thankful, you attract God's blessing. And if you're ungrateful, you attract decadence and lack of blessings. In other words, ingratitude produces lack of blessings. I believe they're spiritual law. So here's one of my thoughts. Thanksgiving is not like a Sabbath. It's not a sin to not keep it. It's not like an annual Sabbath or anything. But isn't it a vehicle to get God's blessing?
I mean, it's Thanksgiving. The whole concept of it was to thank God for our blessings. Yep. That was the concept from the beginning.
It should be a focal point for that.
Yeah. That's why the world hates. I mean, that's why most of the people in this country don't care much about it, I believe. They don't believe in God or they hate him, one or the other.
They don't like their family either. Yeah.
Well, that's true. And that's another thing. People don't go to each other's houses because of the hate for each other now, because one person's this political in this way and another political that way, and it's just not good.
You have to learn to forgive your relatives for their backwardness. Don't you agree?
Yeah, good point.
They don't know any better.
One other point, one other aspect that this country has that most of the world does not is you can start out poor and change your financial status all on your own effort. In most countries, you're born into a class and you stay in that class, including Britain and India and many other countries. Whatever you're born, that's where you're stuck, but not in this country. You can be poor and you can do things to bring yourself out of poverty and become a millionaire, a billion, whatever you have the drive to become. Breaks help here and there, but you got the opportunity. There's no one, and except for government and some of the regulations and trash, stopping you.
There's that opportunity again that's here, that's not in other countries of the world.
Yeah, they don't have it.
It's very true, and even in some of the modern discussions of prosperity or how to get ahead, it's almost like we hobble ourselves from the get-go. We always talk in terms of jobs and benefits and things like that, and the proper education, and you completely it seems like it sidesteps the self-reliant spirit that characterized this country, in that you don't need that even necessarily. You don't need to work for anyone else. You have the ability to go out and start on your own, in something that even, doesn't require a lot of skill or knowledge or anything more than sweat and dedication, and make a very good life. And you'll see, down here in Texas, you can see, immigrant families, if you will, who obviously came over here with nothing and yet are very prosperous, even if what they do, the snooty side would be like, oh, it's so menial or whatever, to mow or to clean or to, to be the sewer guy or something like that, and think, oh, yuck, like I would never do that. And that guy is killing it. He's making big money and provides for his family and, everything like that, because there's not this pride or like, oh, I'm too good to do that. No, that's not what it's about. It's about being able to get out there and to work and to provide a good life for yourself, however, in whichever way opportunity presents itself. And, as we get into, the now when we feel entitled or, well, I could never do that, or, I'm going to live in my mom's basement instead, guy mentality, that's no good. There's no benefit that's coming from that. If you're just too good for real work, it's no good.
Communists and socialists try to use, and all these other countries that have these class systems, they use class to divide people to try and get to implement their communist ideals. But we don't have that here, so they went with slavery or women's lib or you name it, but they couldn't do it with class because we don't have that system here. So that's why they use other things to divide us and get us, at each other's throats.
Some of the stuff about the wealthy still plays, that plays, well, they have all this and, that's wrong. Or corporations, corporations are an easy target, because it's a big evil conglomerate, never mind that it, there's some benefit to it. But
the billionaires need to pay their fair share. Well, how many poor people have you ever worked for? I never worked for a poor person. They never employed me. They never hired me. You know what I mean? You don't work, it's people with the money that hire people. And the math goes that if you confiscate every billionaire's dollar, you could fund the government for 3 weeks or something. It's a pittance. But they like to use that to keep us divided. More things.
And the fair share thing, there's some merit to the argument, but what's the solution? Who's the gentleman, was his name Ben something? The gentleman that ran for president, he was advocating for the flat tax. No more foolishness.
Oh, yeah.
No more complicated legal code. Everybody pays 10%. It's over. You don't need a lawyer. Yeah, there's no problem with that. You want to talk about fair share? Fine. Do something like that. Cut out all the rebates and the child credits and all this other stuff, and let's just play it straight and everybody pay the same. Perfectly fine, perfectly legitimate. But
get rid of the IRS. You realize all those IRS rules are a way to give the government more power.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Make it incredibly complex. We got to go. I don't know. Turn it into a whole labyrinth. By all means, do away with that. Fair share, go for it. But meanwhile.
But I think the more thankful we are, the more we'll attract God's blessings and get ourselves in a better attitude, if that's the right word, spirit. Right. I think being in gratitude, you ever see a ungrateful teenager or child, you owe it to me. But
Yeah.
but they're not thankful. You just want to, never mind.
I have young children, and I found like it's kind of a struggle to teach thankfulness when they have it pretty good. You know, they're well fed and they got more than way too many toys to play with, just entirely too many. I want to get rid of them so bad. I just want to, haul them off. At any rate, but to teach thankfulness that hey, this is not you're not entitled to anything. None of this is automatic. But people that care for you and that worked hard, this is you got to do your part, and whatever it may be. It's pretty small, but you're going to take your plates and you're going to clean up your toys. You're going to do some stuff around here, man. It's hard. What do you think you can do to teach kids to be thankful, to appreciate? Oftentimes it's learned in poverty, and yet, you want to provide for your children and your family, and grandparents, want to give the grandkids things and all that. But sometimes you end up with a bunch of ungrateful little wretches. How do you sidestep that? How do you teach them to appreciate what they do have?
Yeah. Yeah.
It is hard to duplicate the wonders. Tell you what, Ken, we can probably pass over that last scripture, 2 Timothy 3, where one of the bad things of people in the end time will be unthankfulness and ingratitude. But people can look it up, 2 Timothy 3, 1-4. But let's play the music and talk prophecy just for a few minutes.
All right.
Okay.
And then we have an announcement after that.
Yeah. You want to go and do the announcement now? Maybe it's important to do the announcement first.
Sure. We're going to have a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week live feed channel soon. Not sure exactly how it's going to play out completely, but whether it's I may just run it on here for a while, but Michael may decide to have it and run Garner Ted stuff through it, run sermons through it, run this program through it, and the church has a ton of material and content to add to it, but it'll be a 24/7, at least on YouTube and on Rumble. So, and we're probably going to put up a dedicated channel for it. So if you see it, we're going to advertise it as much as possible. Make sure you subscribe.
If you subscribe, whenever you go to YouTube, it'll probably be available to you.
Yes. And if you did not subscribe to this channel, please do.
Yeah, hit the subscribe button. We need it.
Yeah. As the streamers say, smash the subscribe button or like button or whatever. I don't know, but subscribe at least.
Hit them both.
You don't have to like it. Just subscribe to it.
Well, anyway, I was thinking one of the big issues is Christians are being persecuted in much of the world, at least nominal Christians. And one of the worst places is Nigeria. And I heard a discussion of, I guess, so-called expert on Africa. He was saying Nigeria is such a complex country with so many problems. And I guess the northern half has Boko Haram, a powerful Islamic group. And they believe their conversion is we put the sword to your throat, you convert to Islam or die. And by the way, that's how Islam spread rapidly through the world. And they're massacring Christian churches in Nigeria. The question is, can our government and other governments actually reduce that kind of thing? I know people talk about it. They say, yeah, it's going to be trickier to do than you think it is. Any thought? Because I think Christian persecution is, in a way, going to grow as we get and anti-Semitism as we get closer to the end. It would be nice if they could slow it down for a while.
Yeah, Trump wants to tack on tariffs and stuff to try and shut it down, I guess. I don't know how he's going to pull it off, to tell you the truth.
Yeah,
I don't think you can trust the government. That government will say whatever they have to say to keep the money flowing.
Oh, yeah.
But are they willing to back it up? Because it's not easy in a big country so divided.
You can imagine that if they could handle it, they would on their own. It's not a totally new phenomenon. It has been going on for years, ebbing and flowing, and Boko Haram and all these hostages that they've taken, and all this stuff that recurs. Though it's not to make light of it. It's not a thing to be made light of. But what are you going to do short of military action? What are you going to do?
And by the way, you might not remember this, but Michelle Obama found out that they had kidnapped, I think it was 300 Christian girls from some school in Africa, Muslim, like Boko Haram, and she was demanding, and America was going to be sure they got them back. I think eventually, several years later, they're able to buy back maybe 80 of them. But most of them suffered, and our government didn't do that much about it. They just kind of dropped the subject.
That was a horrible instance. They've got laws over there against paying for hostages. So if somebody takes your family hostage, you're not allowed to pay to get them back, technically, because that would encourage hostage taking. You know what I mean? So you can't pay ransom. Though in that instance, they argue that it did get paid, and the government denied it, and all this stuff. But that was horrible. Some of those girls that they got back were pregnant, and they gave them abortions without telling them. There were some stories of them getting them against their will, like they thought they were getting medical treatment, and they got injected with something, and that was what was going on, because there were very strong beliefs about how the kids would turn out because of who they had been fathered by. There's ideas that they would be these evil fighters or whatever it may be. I don't know if it's superstition or necessarily, but that's what they thought, because that's who those children had been fathered by, their captors, these Boko Haram guys, and all that. And that's gruesome, coming and going and sideways. That whole instance was just terrible. We don't like to talk about more foreign entanglements and all of these things. I appreciate that very much, but how do you let things like that go unchecked, and how much is it part of a similar conflict that we're having in other places of the world with really radical elements of Islam want to take over, even similar to what we've faced in Iran? I mean, these things are a threat to governments all over Central and Western Africa, and Eastern Africa, of course, is rife with it. It's a big problem. At what point do you stand up to it, or do you empower your allies to stand up to it if there's somebody there that's willing and able?
But you're not going to change the mind of an Islamist.
No.
You're not going to change their mind.
No.
It's a religion to them.
They're commanded to do it.
It's holy war. It's holy war. And you think about it, you get to do horrible things to people, and God will bless you for it.
Well, remember Brennan said that jihad was a religious tenet. It wasn't a bad thing, because Brennan was alleged to have been converted to Islam, and he talked like it. It's just a religious thing. Jihad. It's no big deal.
Well, I think he's one of the guys that they should investigate.
I'm sure he's on the list.
I've heard that line quite a bit before, Ken, that about jihad and it being, your way of your life of overcoming or whatever it may be, and put in those terms and therefore minimized. I mean, that's convenient. It's nice. I hope most people that believe that way do truly think that, but you can't, there's too much evidence to the contrary in a lot of other places in the world that sure is not the whole thing. So
the thing is bothersome is every now and then someone like Michelle will talk about our government doing something. Talk is cheap. And I realize Nigeria is a tough nut to crack, so I'm not saying it'd be easy. But I'm wondering, will it just be more talk, but in the end, Boko Haram will keep chopping down, blowing up Christian churches and murdering people?
Other places where they have this going on, like those three countries where there were coups here in the last few years, Niger, I think, Mali and Burkina Faso all had, big coup, military, changing government. and they said, get the United States out of here. We want them out. We want the UN troops out and all that. And they brought in, the Russians. The Russians had a lot of influence. They were actually waving Russian flags at a lot of these demonstrations where the governments got overthrown. They brought the Russians in. They're still fighting against radical Islamic elements. It hasn't really changed, and I feel like they've kind of come back our direction a little bit on some of that. But it comes down to who's going to talk is cheap. Who's going to do something about it? If those governments are not capable of standing up to it on their own, where are they going to turn? And are we not a reliable ally in that instance?
And speaking about anti-Semitism, even disarming Hamas, which was phase 2 of the peace agreement, they still haven't found, at least that I'm aware of, a multicultural from Islamic world peacekeeping force that is willing to really go in there gun to gun and disarm Hamas.
Yep.
And you can't really have peace until Hamas is disarmed and disbanded. Hopefully, and some of them kicked out of the country.
I was reading this morning. I mean, they are slowly but surely reasserting their control over all kinds of things, including like prices and taking levies or tribute, if you will, when they're bringing things into this zone. Israel's pulled back to this yellow line or whatever it is they call it. Well, when you're in the thick of it, where Hamas is still on the ground, as soon as it was over and there was a ceasefire, they came out real strong. They executed a bunch of people. They accused of collaborating with Israel and other things like that. There was some pretty gnarly public discipline going on over there, and they are quietly, seizing the reins. So where is this force? Where is it going to come from? Who's going to put that up? And like you said, who's going to go in there and actually say, hey, hand them over? We're in charge now. Hamas says, oh, no, we're ready. We're totally in line with the agreement. We're ready. But is it going to happen? Because that's a lot of talk in the meantime.
Yeah. Who's going to do it? I don't want American troops to do it. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying the world does a lot of talk, but it seems like when it comes to good things, they don't step up.
Well, which one of the other Arab powers wants to put their troops as being responsible not only for Hamas being good, but also putting their guys in potential conflict with Israel, depending on how their sympathies lie or whatever it may be? I mean, the potential for it to get ugly again is still very real. It's still there.
Yeah, and they could get accused of, like, they didn't want less Turkish troops in there because they might actually be in cooperation with Hamas.
Right.
Israel won't let him in because they don't trust him. I'll put it that way. So it's a mess. I'm just saying anti-Semitism and anti-Christian is big in much of the world, and not enough is being done about it. They talk and talk, but I'd like to see some results. And if not, maybe that's pushing Bible prophecy in a way. It's bad, but maybe that will precede some of the bad things that are likely to happen in the future. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying yay or nay. I'm just saying I'd like to see it go in the right direction. Well, I guess it's time to call a halt. We're going to talk about the first of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse next week. So be there or be square.
And don't forget, the Friday after Thanksgiving in 2 weeks, we will not have a fresh program. There'll still be a stream probably rolling, but it won't be a fresh one that week.
Yeah, Thanksgiving.
So I want to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you, gentlemen. And hope you enjoy the rest of your Sabbath. And we'll see you all back here next week. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
It's a great start.
Good night.
We're happy you could make it, and so glad you are here, and hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye.